The intention of holding these town hall meetings is to increase the amount of direct and two-way communication between the committee and our community members. Much of our communication tends to have more a one-way nature, such as sending emails through our email list, appearances on television, monthly updates in the community newspapers. The purpose of tonight's event is to provide a forum to report to you firsthand on our activities, our initiatives, our challenges, and more importantly, to get feedback from you, community members, as to what you see regarding the Armenian cause.
The trip that took place was an unusual trip in that the diocese, based in Montreal, chose 4 members of parliament to actually sponsor us to go to Armenia. And they asked 1 conservative, 1 New Democrat, 1 Liberal, and 1 Bloc Québécois to join them on a trip where they could host us and explain issues, both historical issues about Armenia, as well as very current issues, and so that we as parliamentarians would have a better understanding of what it was that we could do in Canada to make life better in Armenia. The Armenian diaspora in Canada may not be huge in numbers, but you're quite loud. And that's a good thing, because you make up a small percentage of the Canadian population, but you are an important business community, an important professional community, an important cultural community and artistic community, and so we pay attention. When the Armenian community speaks, we listen. Not because there are that many votes involved, but because the contributions are rich. And because we know that the Armenians who are living in Canada may still have 1 foot in their homeland, but are also firmly planted in Canada and have an idea about how to make the multicultural Canadian reality better for everybody. And we are all part of the Canada-Armenia Parliamentary Association now, and I think there are about 40 or 50 members of Parliament of the 308 that have joined that association, and we try to foster a relationship between parliamentarians in Armenia and parliamentarians in Canada. What I knew about Armenia before I went was largely based around issues of the genocide. It was largely based on that conversation that has gone on in many countries around the world and has gone on in Canada for a number of decades that led to the recognition of the Armenian genocide, both by the Canadian Parliament and by the Canadian government. We have a story to tell to all Canadians about Armenia's struggles in the present, certainly their struggles in the past, and about the absolute potential of Canada-Armenian relations economically, culturally, socially, and politically over the next 20, 30, or 40 years that need to be fostered. I think this is time. So we are now at the Genocide Memorial, which is probably one of the most moving moments of my life, as we stood with our parliamentary delegation, both from Armenia and from Canada, and took a moment of silence. Beautiful music is playing. This is outside the memorial, and that is the concert hall and opera hall, which is behind me. And it gives you a sense, it reminded me of the tremendous artistic nature of the place. The beauty of the architecture of the memorial lifted me to hope. Now this is us going into the actual museum, which is beside the memorial. Tony Martin is on my left, Harold Albrecht is in the middle. Actually, I'm not there. Maybe I took the picture, I guess. So I'm not in the picture. My friend Hegop is there, and he was in the picture. This is a testimonial, a diary from a Bertha Morley, who was an American Christian missionary. And I just took a picture of it because through the exhibits, there were witnesses talking about the tragedies of the genocide. And I wanted to make sure that I remembered who she was so I could read about her later. This is a sculpture about the brokenness and hopefulness after the genocide. And it is a symbol for me of both death and brokenness as it's cracked open and life coming up in the middle. And it also was a pointer to the tremendous art that I saw in Armenia. This is a Canadian certificate on the recognition of the Armenian genocide of 1915 and condemns it as an act of a crime against humanity. And that's when it was passed by the House of Commons 153 to 68. This is me signing the Book of Remembrance and taking a few moments in the Genocide Museum just to make sure that I recorded the fact that I was there, and I wrote a note that I hope to go back and read sometime of hopefulness. And this is outside the baptistry, and I felt I was in a holy place. This year when I wrote my Christmas message for the Armenian community, I talked about the strength of a faith for a people that has been battered and persecuted for centuries, and how this church has stood there for centuries, and what a symbol it was for an eternal God, and a sense that God is with us no matter what we go through as individuals, as families, as an ethnic group, as a culture. Now these stone tablets are everywhere. That you know, centuries of stone carving. I don't know what they were doing for a living and how they had so much time to carve beautiful stones. I have over 100 photos of the various stone carvings you see everywhere. These are just a couple of examples of what I saw. Now this is actually inside the treasury, and it is the Armenian alphabet in gold. When I came back, I realized that the issues that were raised for me as a Canadian parliamentarian were important. Everywhere we went, the talk about needing an embassy, a Canadian embassy in Yerevan, was critical. That to go to Moscow to deal with a Canadian embassy was causing difficulty for families, difficulty for people wanting to travel, difficult for businesses wanting to do work, involved in trade, involved in the economic things. So one of the first things I did when I got back was I wrote the Prime Minister a letter and the Minister of Foreign Affairs a letter to ask them to do the study immediately about the benefits for Canada of having an embassy in Armenia, in Yerevan. That we need to have a diplomatic mission there. Whether we'll get a full embassy or not, I don't know, but I thought I'd ask for the full embassy so that they could at least give us a trade mission or a consular office. But I will still be arguing, and I'm going to be arguing with my own leader so that we put a platform item in that we will open an embassy in Yerevan. So that's an issue that I learned. And while you know that's important for Armenia, and that's helpful for the diaspora here, I think it's to Canada's advantage. I think Armenia is a country that has a high literacy rate, a tremendously well-educated population that is ripe for Canadian opportunities. I think Canada will do well in Armenia. So it's not just out of good thinking and worry about you that I want that. It is going to be helpful for Canadians of Armenian descent, but it's also good for all Canadians. It also puts us into a country that frankly is a beacon of civilization and hope in a difficult neighborhood. Canada needs to plant our flag in Armenia with Armenians to help them. We need to be there in a real way to say that we know the pressures that you are under.